You ever notice how the desert never really sleeps? The heat never lets up, not even after the sun goes down, and the silence can get so heavy it presses down on your chest, making it hard to breathe. Phoenix Carter felt all of that as she drove her county-issued Silverado along the dusty stretch of Route 17, a sliver of cracked asphalt snaking through the emptiest part of Arizona. She'd been sheriff for 4 days, just 4, and already the locals watched her like she was a problem they hadn't decided how to solve. It was nearly midnight when she saw the headlights in her rearview mirror, weaving, blinking, dancing closer. She slowed, squinting through the windshield. Maybe just some lost drunks from the Redstone bar, she thought. Or maybe her truck's radio squawked. Static, then silence. Then her phone buzzed, the screen blinking with an unknown number before going dead. Phoenix's instincts, the ones the army had drilled into her, kicked in. She reached for her sidearm, checked the lock on her driver's door, scanned the darkness. No wind, no moon, nothing except saguaro shadows crawling across the sand. The other car cut its lights. Phoenix felt a chill skate down her neck. Despite the sweat pooling under her collar, the Silverado's engine coughed, stuttered, and then, dead. No power, no lights, no chance. Before she could react, floodlights snapped on behind her, blinding and harsh. Doors slammed, boots pounded the gravel. Phoenix rolled down her window a crack, hand on her weapon. "Who's out there?" she called. A man's voice, muffled by a mask, growled, "Sheriff Carter, get out of the truck, now." Phoenix hesitated, her heart hammered, the scars on her left shoulder aching, echoes of old wounds. Still, she wasn't the type to scare easy. "You picked the wrong night," she muttered, pushing the door open and stepping out. "This is my town now." Something heavy cracked across her jaw. Her knees buckled, hands yanked her arms behind her, twisting metal cuffs around her wrists. She glimpsed a figure in a black bandana, eyes like pinpricks of hate, before they dragged her into the hard-baked earth. "New sheriff's got to learn the rules," another voice sneered. "Redstone don't need outsiders." Phoenix spat blood into the sand, tasting copper and fury. "You're making a mistake!" A boot drove into her ribs. The world spun, blurry with pain. She tried to fight, tried to scream, but they stuffed a rag in her mouth and wrapped a chain around her waist, locking her to the bumper of her own truck. "We're gonna leave you here for the coyotes, Carter," one whispered, crouching low. "You and your bleeding heart plans. No one wants 'em. This is a warning. Next time we'll bury you where nobody finds you." The truck roared to life, her keys in their hands. Gravel sprayed her face as they peeled off, leaving her on her knees in the dust. When the engine faded into the distance, all that was left was the rasp of her own breathing, ragged and sharp. She tugged at the chain. No give. Her wrists bled against the cuffs, slick with sweat and sand. For a while, Phoenix just lay there, staring at the endless spill of stars above. Her mind flickered back to Afghanistan. Heat, sand, the sudden crack of gunfire, the desperate scramble for cover. She'd survived worse, she told herself, but this felt different. This was home, or what was supposed to be. Her mother's voice rang in her ears, soft and fierce. "Stand your ground, Hiha, even if nobody stands with you." She lost track of time. The desert grew colder, then hotter again, as the sun inched up, burning her skin. Her lips cracked, throat raw with thirst. Once she thought she heard a car in the distance. Tried to scream, but the rag choked her voice to nothing. A coyote padded close, sniffing her boots. She kicked out, teeth gritted. The animal darted away, but it would be back. She drifted, mind floating somewhere between the memories and the sand. Her body screamed for rest, but her spirit refused to quit. Still, she was fading. Then, through the rippling haze, Phoenix saw something move along the ridge. Not men, not coyotes, shadows, long-legged, powerful, wild, horses, mustangs. They moved like liquid midnight, muscles rippling beneath glossy coats, manes tossing in the breeze. At their front strode a stallion as black as volcanic glass, his eyes catching the dawn with a fierce, intelligent glint. The herd circled her, hooves thudding softly. Phoenix felt no fear, only wonder. The stallion stepped forward, lowering his head, nostrils flaring. For a moment, human and horse just looked at each other. Phoenix tried to reach out, but her arms refused. The Mustang snorted, pawed at the ground, then, unbelievably, began to tug at the chain with his teeth. The others crowded close, forming a living shield between her and the rising sun. Dust swirled around them, shimmering gold. Phoenix's vision blurred. She tried to speak, tried to thank them, but all that came out was a hoarse whisper. If this was a dream, she didn't want to wake up. Somewhere, a coyote howled. The Mustang stamped and snorted, driving it back into the brush. The stallion kept working at the chain, relentless, as if he understood this was no ordinary night, and she was no ordinary human. Phoenix let the tears fall, salt burning her wounds. For the first time since her ambush, she felt hope, raw, wild, and utterly alive. Time unraveled for Phoenix. She could only guess how long she'd been chained in the desert, but the agony in her body told her it was far too long. Every muscle ached, her mouth was dry as old leather, and her vision kept swimming in and out of focus. The Mustangs circled her, their presence oddly soothing. Each time she faded toward unconsciousness, the sound of their hooves and the flicker of their shadows pulled her back. Ashwalker, the black stallion, remained close. There was something nearly human in his eyes, something fierce and full of purpose. He nudged Phoenix's shoulder with his velvet muzzle, as if urging her not to give up. The rest of the herd, 6 or 7 wild horses in all, moved around her in a loose, ever-shifting perimeter. They kicked at the dust, tossing their heads, keeping a constant vigil. Phoenix watched in amazement as they drove off every coyote, vulture, or scavenger that dared come near. One young mare let out a shrill warning and charged at a creeping shadow. Her hooves thundered, and the coyote yelped and disappeared. Phoenix smiled through cracked lips. When the heat built again, shimmering up from the desert floor, Ashwalker pawed at the chain binding Phoenix to the truck. She tried to help, using what strength she had to twist her body toward him. Every movement sent fire through her wrists and shoulders, but she gritted her teeth and pushed on. Ashwalker gripped the heavy chain in his teeth, yanking with all his might. Phoenix could hear the metal scrape and groan. Suddenly, as if fate itself had decided she'd suffered enough, the bolt anchoring the chain to the bumper popped loose with a sharp metallic clang. She slumped forward, breathing hard, barely able to process what had just happened. Her hands were still cuffed, but now she was no longer tied to the truck. The herd pressed in closer, as if sensing her renewed hope. Just then, a low, ominous rumble rolled across the open land. At first, Phoenix thought it was her mind playing tricks, but then she saw the sky darken at the horizon. An enormous sandstorm was rolling in, churning up the desert in a wall of copper and gold. Panic gnawed at her. She'd seen sandstorms in the Middle East, knew how brutal they could be. Stripping flesh, blinding eyes, suffocating anyone caught unprepared. With her injuries and cuffs, she wouldn't last minutes, but the Mustangs didn't bolt. Ashwalker stepped over Phoenix, sheltering her with his broad body. The herd formed a tight semicircle, their backs to the wind, shielding her from the worst of the storm. Dust lashed her skin, but she stayed low, feeling the heat and power of the horses all around her. They whinnied and stomped, enduring the storm's fury without flinching. Phoenix buried her face against Ashwalker's flank, breathing in the earthy, wild scent of the animal. She let herself drift, half-conscious, trusting in the strange protection of these wild horses. How long the storm lasted, she didn't know. At some point, everything went silent again. The wind died, the dust settled, and when Phoenix lifted her head, dawn was breaking over Redstone Valley, painting the world in soft pinks and golds. She tried to move, but her body refused to cooperate. She coughed, choking on the dryness in her throat. The herd stepped back, sensing her struggle but no longer needing to shield her. That's when she heard it, a distant voice, frantic and urgent. "Phoenix! Phoenix! Where are you?" It was Sierra. The sound of her childhood friend's voice sent a jolt of life through Phoenix. She tried to shout, but only managed a raspy croak. The Mustangs, sensing help had arrived, tossed their heads and whinnied, their calls echoing across the empty valley. A search party appeared, 5 or 6 figures silhouetted against the dawn, led by Sierra Martinez, sturdy, determined, and never one to give up on anyone, least of all Phoenix. Sierra spotted her, broke into a run, and dropped to her knees at Phoenix's side. "Oh my God, Phoenix! What happened? Who did this?" Phoenix managed a weak grin. "You're late, Martinez. I was just starting to enjoy the sunrise." Sierra let out a breath, torn between relief and outrage. "Always with the jokes. Let's get you out of here." The other searchers, volunteers from town, a couple of local ranchers, and Deputy Luis Chavez, helped cut the cuffs, wrapped Phoenix in a blanket, and gave her water. She drank greedily, the coolness shocking her parched throat. Her hands shook, but she gripped Sierra's arm like a lifeline. Just before they loaded her onto a stretcher, Phoenix turned her head, searching for Ashwalker. He stood apart from the others, tail streaming like a black flag, eyes fixed on her. For a moment, the desert was silent except for the wind. Sierra followed her gaze. "Are those wild horses? Did they stay with you all night?" Phoenix nodded. "They saved me, Sierra. I'm not sure how, but they did." The search party murmured, some in awe, others in skepticism. Stories about wild Mustangs in Redstone had always carried a whiff of legend, but nobody could deny what they saw now. Ashwalker stamped the ground, snorted, and led his herd away, vanishing into the early morning haze. By the time Phoenix reached the ambulance, the whole town was buzzing. Word spread faster than wildfire, how the new sheriff had been left for dead, only to be guarded and rescued by a mysterious herd of Mustangs. Some called it a miracle. Others whispered about omens, curses, or old spirits. Phoenix just closed her eyes, listening to the hum of the engine and the steady heartbeat of her friend beside her. In her exhaustion, a new resolve took root. She knew the attack was only the beginning, that the real battle for Redstone was still to come. But she'd seen something in those wild eyes, something that refused to break. Whatever darkness waited ahead, she wasn't facing it alone. And somewhere out there, Ashwalker watched, always just out of reach, but never truly gone. The air in Redstone General Hospital was thick with antiseptic and the faint hum of machines. Phoenix Carter woke to the soft whir of a ceiling fan and a splitting pain that radiated from her ribs to her skull. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all crashed back. The ambush, the blows, the endless chain, the wild horses shielding her from death. The memory was sharp and dreamlike at the same time. She shifted in the bed, wincing. Bandages wrapped her midsection, and her hands were clean but raw, purple bruises blooming across her knuckles, An IV dripped fluid into her arm. For a second, she thought she saw the silhouette of Ashwalker at the window. Just a trick of the morning sun against the blinds. A nurse came in, young and wary. "Sheriff Carter, you're awake, that's good. Do you remember what happened?" Phoenix nodded. Her throat ached. "Yeah, too much." The nurse glanced at her chart, then back at Phoenix with a look that was almost skeptical. "The sheriff's office has been calling, and there's a woman, Sierra Martinez. She refuses to leave the lobby until she sees you." Phoenix managed a crooked smile. That sounds like her. Once the nurse left, the room was too quiet. Phoenix's body throbbed with 100 small agonies, but it was her mind that tormented her. Flashes of Afghanistan, shouts, dust, chaos, blended with last night's pain. She tried to breathe, counting her heartbeat, but the tension refused to fade. A knock at the door broke the spiral. Sierra stepped in, rumpled from a sleepless night, eyes burning with anger and relief. She carried a bag from the local diner. "You look like hell, Phoenix," Sierra said, setting the bag on the side table. "Egg sandwich, no onions, just how you like it." Phoenix reached for it with trembling hands, but barely managed a bite before her stomach turned. Sierra sat beside her, watching closely. "I know you're going to ask, so yes. The doc says you'll live. Bruised ribs, dehydration, some cuts, and a mild concussion. But you'll walk out of here. Maybe not today, but soon." Phoenix closed her eyes, relief and shame mingling inside her. "Thanks. I'm sorry, Sierra. I should have been smarter." "Hey," Sierra's voice was gentle but firm. "You're alive, and that's all that matters. I'm just glad those Mustangs showed up when they did. You keep making friends in strange places." Phoenix tried to laugh, but it hurt. "Yeah, I guess so." The mood shifted as Sierra hesitated. "You should know, not everyone's happy you survived. Words all over town. Some say you staged the whole thing to get sympathy. Others think you're just not tough enough for Redstone." Phoenix's jaw tightened. She could almost hear the whispers through the hospital walls. "Not from here. Half Navajo, half Latina. Not one of us. Maybe she's not cut out for this job." It stung, but it wasn't new. She'd spent a lifetime walking into rooms where people waited for her to fail. But the pain was deeper now. Redstone was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where her mother's family had deep roots, where her own service might mean something. "I'll handle it," Phoenix said, but her voice was thin. "I'm not going anywhere." Sierra nodded, but her eyes were clouded. "I'm looking into the attack, quietly. Whoever did this, they're connected. Too careful to leave evidence behind. I have a couple leads. Old friends in the Border Patrol owe me favors." Phoenix's eyes burned with sudden tears. She blinked them away, cursing herself for the weakness. "Don't do anything stupid, Sierra. Stupid is my middle name. Besides, I can't just let you fight this alone." For the next few days, healing was slow and lonely. Nurses changed shifts, checking her vitals and bringing bland meals. Local officials visited, some with forced smiles, others with thinly veiled suspicion. The mayor sent flowers, but didn't stay long. Her predecessor's friends on the town council visited too, mostly to see if she'd quit. Phoenix tried to rest, but sleep brought dreams. Chains rattling in the darkness, horses running, gunfire echoing. Each time she jerked awake, she felt smaller, as if the desert had swallowed part of her spirit. A Navajo elder from the edge of town came to see her. Mrs. Yazzie had deep-set eyes and a calm, unhurried way of speaking. "My granddaughter says you saw the black one, Ashwalker. That's what we call him. He watches over this valley. Maybe he saw something in you." Phoenix nodded, struggling to believe. He saved me. They all did. Mrs. Yazzie pressed her hand gently. Rest now. The desert is hard, but it gives back what you put in. The hospital television flickered with local news, speculation running wild. Is the new sheriff up for the job? One anchor asked. How did wild Mustangs become part of her rescue? Miracle or manufactured story? Sierra sat with Phoenix every night, going over names, maps, and whispered leads. The attack was planned. Somebody paid those men. You rattled the wrong cage. Phoenix's frustration grew, mixed with shame. I thought I could come here and make things better, but all I've done is make myself a target. You're still breathing, Sierra pointed out. That scares them. On her 5th day in the hospital, Phoenix got out of bed and stood by the window. The desert spread out below, fierce and beautiful. The pain in her body was still there, but so was the stubborn fire in her chest. I'm not quitting, she whispered, staring out across the horizon. Not now. Not ever. As the sun set, she caught a glimpse of movement in the distance. A band of Mustangs, running free along the ridge, Ashwalker at the lead. Phoenix smiled through the ache, a new resolve hardening in her heart. Let them whisper. Let them doubt. She was here. She was alive. And she was ready for whatever came next. Phoenix Carter left Redstone General under a bruised, lavender sky. The world felt sharper, colors more intense. Every ache in her body a stubborn reminder that she was still here, still fighting. She wore her sheriff's badge pinned over her heart, even if it felt heavier than ever. Sierra insisted on driving her home, though Phoenix grumbled that she could manage. You're not immortal, Sierra said, glancing over from the driver's seat. Don't try to be. Phoenix smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening. Tell that to the old guard. They seem to think I'm some kind of threat. The town of Redstone unfurled before them, its main street lined with weathered storefronts, faded banners, and a few half-interested onlookers. Phoenix watched them watching her, gauging, measuring, waiting to see if she'd run. She stared right back. Sierra pulled up in front of Phoenix's small house, a rental on the outskirts, with a clear view of the red cliffs beyond town. You need anything, you call. Don't play hero, Sierra warned, her tone half serious. Phoenix squeezed her hand. Thanks, partner. Don't let them scare you off either. When the door closed behind her, Phoenix let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The quiet was a balm, and she stood by the window, gazing at the desert, letting herself feel safe for just a minute. But safety was a luxury she couldn't afford. Within an hour, Phoenix was back in uniform. Her movements were slow, her body stiff, but the badge felt right in her palm. She gathered her notes, the fragments of evidence she'd managed to piece together before the attack. A partial license plate, a strip of fabric torn from a mask, tire tracks burned into memory. She spread everything out across her kitchen table and got to work. She called Sierra. I need the incident photos and any statements from the search party. Can you get them for me? Already on your porch, boss, Sierra replied, the hint of a smile in her voice. Also, the mayor wants a word. She's bringing coffee. Phoenix frowned. Lena Kim? I barely met her at my swearing in. Guess she wants to fix that. Watch your back. A knock interrupted her. Phoenix opened the door to find Mayor Lena Kim, short, sharp-eyed, and impeccably dressed, carrying a cardboard tray of lattes. Beside her stood 2 high school students Phoenix recognized from the community garden project, both clutching notepads. Sheriff Carter, Lena greeted, her voice warm but cautious. Can we come in? Phoenix stepped aside, curiosity piqued. Sure, but my place isn't exactly City Hall. They settled around her table, the young activists, Jordan and Maya, eagerly opening their laptops. Lena leaned in, lowering her voice. I'm not here for politics. I know what happened to you isn't an isolated act. There's a network, smuggling, trafficking, all of it, festering here for years. You rattled the wrong tree. Phoenix sipped the coffee, eyeing Lena. You believe me then? I do. And so do these two. Lena nodded to the teens. They've been documenting illegal activity on the outskirts. Drones, trail cams, the whole deal. I want to help you clean up Redstone. Phoenix let out a quiet laugh. You're braver than the city council. Maya grinned. We're just stubborn. Jordan chimed in. We've mapped the horse trails too, Sheriff. We think the smugglers are using them to move goods at night. We can show you. Phoenix's heart thudded. That's exactly the kind of intel we need. But you have to be careful. Whoever did this to me, if they know you're helping... We're not scared, Maya said, her voice trembling just a little. We want our town back. Lena met Phoenix's gaze. We're with you, Sheriff. Quietly for now. But you're not alone. For the first time since the attack, Phoenix felt a crack in the isolation. She gathered the evidence, studying the map the students produced. Lines snaking through the hills, red dots marking unusual activity, faded hoofprints intersecting with fresh tire tracks. That evening, after the mayor and her young allies left, Phoenix drove out to Ashwalker's valley. The light was soft and gold, shadows long across the scrubby grass. She parked at the edge and walked on aching legs, carrying a canteen of water and a narrow ribbon, blue and silver, the colors of her badge. She knelt by a well-worn game trail, poured the water into a shallow depression, and tied the ribbon to a branch above. The gesture was both thanks and promise, a blend of Navajo tradition and her own deep respect for the wild. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a flicker of movement. Ashwalker himself, mane whipping in the wind, eyes bright and cautious. Phoenix held her ground, heart thumping. Thank you, she whispered. You didn't have to save me, but you did. I won't forget. Ashwalker snorted, stamping the earth. He watched her for a long minute, then turned and vanished into the dusk. Phoenix stood there as the sun slid away, feeling the thread that now bound her not just to the town, but to the land itself. Back home, Sierra called again, her voice tense. Phoenix, we have another problem. I found something in the old case files. Links between the ex-sheriff and a couple of ranch hands connected to the night you were attacked. It's bigger than we thought. Phoenix's pulse spiked. Don't go alone. We need proof, not martyrs. Copy that. Also, the activists want to set up a watch. Monitor the valleys, protect the horses, maybe keep an eye on the smugglers' routes. Phoenix nodded to herself. Let's do it, but keep it quiet. We don't know who we can trust. That night, Phoenix stared at her board of evidence. Lines crisscrossing, faces overlapping. Friends, foes, the uncertain in between. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was fighting alone. Maybe hope wasn't just a wild horse in the desert. Maybe it was a herd, gathering strength, ready to charge when the time was right. And maybe, just maybe, Redstone could change, if enough people stood together and refused to run. Redstone was quieter than usual that night, the streets empty, only a few neon signs blinking in the dust-choked darkness. Phoenix felt a storm brewing beneath the stillness, a pressure she couldn't shake. Her kitchen table was scattered with maps, notes, and photographs from the activists' drones. Jordan and Maya had left just an hour before, full of adrenaline and quiet pride. But now the house felt hollow, as if danger lurked in every shadow. Sierra had insisted on staying at the station to sort files, But Phoenix worried about her. The two exchanged texts every hour, a silent agreement just in case. Phoenix took comfort in the routines, checking her doors, loading her sidearm, moving quietly through the rooms. But tonight felt different, like the last calm breath before something broke. At midnight, her phone buzzed. Sierra, the message was terse. Saw a truck circling, lights off, possible surveillance. You good? Phoenix replied, all clear for now, stay sharp. She moved to the window, peering into the dark. Her eyes tracked a faint glow in the distance, someone moving near the edge of Main Street. She slipped on her jacket, clipped her badge to her belt, and stepped outside, boots crunching on the gravel. The air was heavy, the moon low and sharp. Phoenix's instincts screamed at her. She was being watched. She circled the house, saw nothing, but her nerves hummed. As she turned back toward her truck, a low rumble shattered the quiet. A blast, sudden and violent, somewhere downtown. She ran, her legs burning, every sense on high alert. Flames licked the sky behind the sheriff's office, red and orange twisting upward. Phoenix sprinted, heart pounding as sirens wailed. Neighbors peered from behind locked doors, and someone yelled, "Call 911! The station's on fire!" Sierra was already there, her face streaked with sweat and soot. "They hit us hard," she shouted over the roar. "Molotovs came out of nowhere! Files!" Phoenix grabbed her arm, dragging her away from the crumbling wall. "Get everyone out! They want us trapped in here!" Shots rang out from across the street, sending both women diving behind the station's old patrol car. The fire illuminated masked figures darting through the chaos, smashing windows, tossing more bottles into the blaze. Phoenix returned fire, aiming low, driving them back. Sierra crawled to her, eyes wild. "They're after the evidence files. Jordan and Maya's drone footage, the old case ledgers, everything." Phoenix glanced at the burning building. "We can't let them destroy it." As smoke thickened, the heat became unbearable. The attackers regrouped, pinning Phoenix and Sierra against the car. The sound of gunfire echoed, louder now, as the flames consumed more of the building. Then, through the smoke and terror, a strange, thunderous sound rose, the rapid drumbeat of hooves. Phoenix's mind flashed back to the desert, to Ashwalker and the wild mustangs. She didn't trust her senses until the herd burst through the alley, manes flying, eyes wild with purpose. Ashwalker, black as night and more powerful than legend, led the charge, his herd stampeding through the parking lot. The attackers scattered, diving out of the way as hooves and muscle barreled toward them. Several masked men dropped their weapons, choosing to run rather than face the wrath of Redstone's most unexpected defenders. Phoenix shouted, "Now go!" and she and Sierra ducked into the burning building. Smoke curled around them, choking and thick, but they forced their way to the evidence room. Flames licked the file cabinets, but the main safe still stood. Sierra punched in the code with shaking hands. "Hurry! Hurry!" The safe opened. They grabbed as many files and hard drives as they could, stuffing them into canvas bags. The ceiling groaned, a timber split with a scream. Phoenix shielded Sierra as embers showered down. The Mustangs crashed through the far side of the building, Ashwalker leading. He stomped and pawed, forcing a burning beam aside just enough for the women to crawl through. Sierra coughed, barely able to see. Phoenix dragged her, heart pounding, muscles screaming in protest. Outside, chaos reigned. The herd surrounded the station, scattering any would-be attackers. Ashwalker reared, mane blazing like a war banner, driving the last few thugs into the darkness. Sierra looked at Phoenix, eyes brimming with awe and disbelief. "I never thought I'd see the day." "The horses." Phoenix helped her up, coughing. "They saved us. Again." Police cars screeched up, lights painting the night blue and white. Mayor Lena Kim leapt from her car, followed by Jordan, Maya, and half the town's volunteers. Someone screamed, "The evidence! Do you have it?" Phoenix nodded, holding up the bag. "We've got enough to blow this open, if we make it through tonight." The fire department doused the station, water hissing against flames. The Mustangs lingered at the edge of the parking lot, breath steaming, their bodies shimmering in the firelight. Ashwalker watched Phoenix, his gaze steady and proud. As the smoke cleared and the immediate threat faded, Phoenix knew the battle was far from over. The criminals had struck back hard, trying to silence her, to bury the truth. But the town had witnessed something new. A line had been crossed, and even the wildest hearts had taken a side. Phoenix stood tall, battered but unbroken, Sierra at her side. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "But tonight, we stand together. And we don't run." In the darkness, Ashwalker tossed his head, as if in silent agreement. The aftermath of the fire hung heavy over Redstone. The sheriff's office was a blackened shell, the air thick with the scent of scorched paper and soaked ashes. Volunteers sifted through debris by flashlight, while Sierra and Phoenix hauled what was left of the saved evidence into Lena Kim's office, now an improvised command center. Nobody slept. The adrenaline still surged, but so did the shock and grief at how close they'd come to losing everything. But there was another loss that gnawed at Phoenix, a deeper, more immediate worry. Ashwalker. When the Mustangs had charged through the chaos, Phoenix had caught only glimpses: the flash of a black mane, the gleam of wild eyes, hooves kicking aside burning timber. In the confusion, Ashwalker had shielded her, pushing aside a flaming beam and rearing up to scatter a masked man who'd tried to corner her. Phoenix's memory of it was a blur, except for one gut-wrenching detail: the echo of a gunshot, a single desperate crack lost in the storm of violence. Now, as dawn approached, a chill pressed against the sweat on her skin. She tried to convince herself Ashwalker was fine, that wild animals always found a way. But as she moved through the ruined parking lot, she found the tracks: Mustang hoofprints, deep and scattered, and a trail of blood leading out toward the desert. Sierra caught up to her, face drawn, hair matted with ash. "Phoenix, where are you going? You need to rest. Let the paramedics check you." "I can't," Phoenix said, voice low. "He's hurt. Ashwalker. He took a bullet for us, Sierra." Sierra hesitated. "We'll get the vet. Call animal control." Phoenix shook her head. "He won't let anyone close. He only let me in once. I have to do this myself." She grabbed a first aid kit from her truck, tucked a canteen under her arm, and started toward the hills. The sky was still gray, the first sun not yet cresting the red rocks. Every step was agony. Her ribs still ached, and the smoke from the fire made her chest burn. But Phoenix pushed through it, driven by something older and fiercer than pain. The trail was easy to follow, the blood a dark ribbon on the sand. As she moved deeper into the valley, the wind picked up, stirring dust devils around her boots. Her mind raced with memories: her mother teaching her old Navajo healing songs, her army days when every wound felt like a battle you couldn't afford to lose. She whispered prayers to herself, half in English, half in Dine. Eventually, she found Ashwalker lying in a patch of wild sage away from the herd. The great stallion's coat was slick with sweat, his flanks rising and falling too fast. A red stain spread from his shoulder, dark and glistening in the morning light. Phoenix knelt beside him, speaking softly. "Easy, boy. I'm here." Ashwalker's ears flicked back, but he didn't bolt. He watched her, nostrils flaring, eyes full of pain but refusing to surrender. Phoenix's hands trembled as she poured water into her palm, holding it to his lips. Ashwalker drank, shuddering, then lowered his head again. She examined the wound. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, tearing flesh but missing bone. It bled freely, and Phoenix's stomach twisted at the sight. She cleaned it as best she could, using gauze and antiseptic from the kit. All the while she sang quietly, old words meant to soothe both spirit and body. "You saved us, Ashwalker," she murmured. "You saved all of us. I won't leave you." For hours she stayed by his side, fighting the urge to break down. The sun climbed higher, the desert heating up, but Phoenix didn't move. She shielded Ashwalker with her body when the flies came, chased away a coyote that sniffed too close. Occasionally, the other Mustangs would appear on the ridge, watching silently, as if waiting for a verdict. Back in town, word spread about the wounded stallion. People whispered about the animal's bravery, how he'd charged into fire and chaos to protect their sheriff. Some scoffed, old-timers who still saw the Mustangs as pests. But others, especially the kids, the activists, the reformers, came out to the edge of the valley with offerings, buckets of water, apples, even hand-drawn cards. Sierra arrived mid-afternoon, carrying a blanket and a battered walkie-talkie. She knelt next to Phoenix, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "He's strong, like you." Phoenix nodded, swallowing a sob. "He shouldn't have had to do this. None of them should." "That's what makes it mean something," Sierra said quietly. "He chose to. Same as you." They stayed together as the heat faded and dusk painted the sky. Ashwalker stirred, weak but alive, and nuzzled Phoenix's hand. She rested her forehead against his muzzle, whispering her promise. "I'll never let a friend suffer alone again, human or animal, not if I can help it." The image of Phoenix and Ashwalker, battered, scarred, but unbroken, spread through Redstone by word of mouth, then by cell phone photos. Even skeptics in town found themselves moved by the sight. The wild stallion and the outsider sheriff, both wounded by violence, refusing to give up on each other or the place they now called home. That night, as the moon rose and the coyotes howled, Phoenix built a small fire. She and Sierra sat together, watching over Ashwalker, refusing to leave. The desert felt different, less lonely, more alive with the possibility that, against all odds, change was coming. And the cost of standing together, of risking your heart and your life, was a price worth paying. As Phoenix finally closed her eyes, Ashwalker breathing steady beside her, she understood. True courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was staying, loving, and fighting, even when it hurt. The night in the valley had left Phoenix changed. Ashwalker's shallow, steady breaths by her side, the distant call of coyotes, and Sierra's quiet strength had planted something stubborn and bright in her chest, a determination that went deeper than anger. By morning, the wounded stallion was standing again, weak but defiant, his herd gathered around him like sentinels. Phoenix gave him one last gentle pat. "You rest now, old friend. We'll do the fighting today." Back in town, the mood was electric. Word of the attack, the fire, and Ashwalker's sacrifice had spread everywhere, from the diner to the school to the dusty corners of Redstone's oldest bar. Support poured in, food from the Martinez Sisters Cafe, handwritten notes tacked to the station's scorched frame, and volunteers lining up to help sift through ruined files. But beneath the hope was a current of fear. Phoenix knew the enemy wasn't done yet. Sierra met her at the mayor's office, her eyes rimmed with fatigue but fierce with purpose. "We've got movement. Jordan and Maya picked up drone footage last night. 2 trucks moving in and out of the abandoned quarry. That's got to be them, right? It lines up with the smuggling routes. And guess what? There's a guy there we recognize." Phoenix took the tablet, scanning the images. Grainy, but clear enough. She saw the face and felt her gut tighten. Owen Drake, the tech entrepreneur who'd played at being Redstone's golden boy, now revealed as the mastermind behind the ring. "He played us all," Sierra said, voice cold. "He bankrolled the town's charity events while running guns, drugs, and people right under our noses." Phoenix set her jaw. "And half the council let him, whether they knew or just didn't ask. That ends today." A plan formed quickly. Sierra, Jordan, Maya, and a handful of young activists, armed with radios, maps, and a battered pickup, would block the quarry's main road. Phoenix and Sierra would approach from the west, using a ravine the Mustangs had cleared months ago. Lena Kim stayed behind, ready to rally help and call in backup if things got ugly. The sun was barely over the horizon when they set out. The desert was hot, but a storm was coming. Phoenix could feel it. Pressure in her bones, the way the air shimmered with tension. She gripped her radio, heart pounding. "Everyone in position?" she whispered. "Copy that," Jordan replied. "We see 2 trucks, 3 men outside. Drake's on the phone, pacing." Phoenix and Sierra crept up the ravine, dust coating their boots, every movement careful. From behind a cluster of boulders, they watched the quarry, a scar in the land, littered with crates and battered equipment. The Mustangs watched too, just visible at the rim, as if waiting for their cue. Suddenly, one of the guards caught sight of movement, Maya's red bandana, flapping by mistake in the wind. He yelled, raising his weapon. The element of surprise was gone. Phoenix didn't hesitate. She and Sierra moved fast, using the confusion to their advantage. "Redstone Sheriff's Office," Phoenix called, her voice echoing. "Drop your weapons and get on the ground." Gunfire erupted, sharp and chaotic. Bullets kicked up dust at Phoenix's feet. Sierra fired back, pinning the guards behind a pickup. The activists moved in from the road, Jordan tossing smoke bombs that covered their approach. Owen Drake bolted for his truck, a duffel bag swinging from his hand. Phoenix took off after him, sprinting across the open quarry. He dove behind the cab, fumbling with his phone. "It's over, Owen!" Phoenix shouted. "You can't buy your way out of this!" He snarled, desperation plain on his face. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Carter. I run this town. You're just a mistake I let happen." She moved in, weapon drawn, but Owen fired wild shots, hitting nothing. Behind him, the Mustangs charged down the quarry slope, led by Ashwalker, wounded but resolute. The earth shook with their approach, nature itself refusing to stand aside for evil. Owen turned to run. Ashwalker cut him off, rearing and kicking up dust. Owen froze, terror written on his face. Phoenix moved fast. "Drop the bag, Owen! Hands up, now!" His bravado shattered. He dropped the duffel, hands trembling. Sierra cuffed him, reading his rights as he spat curses and threats. The activists quickly rounded up the remaining guards, who were too stunned to resist, shocked by the sight of wild horses aiding the law. As they secured the quarry, Phoenix searched Owen's truck and found evidence, records, hard drives, lists of names and payments. The final piece, a notebook detailing every transaction, every payoff to local officials. The community arrived in a rush. Lena Kim, the fire chief, teachers, parents, and elders, all drawn by the news. Some wept, some cheered. For the first time in years, truth flooded the streets of Redstone. But the victory was bittersweet. Phoenix saw it in the faces around her, the guilt, the fear, the realization that so many had looked away, that silence had allowed darkness to grow. She stood before the crowd, her voice steady. This town belongs to all of us. No more secrets, no more fear. If you're ready to build something better, I'll stand with you." As Ashwalker and his herd trotted away into the golden afternoon, Phoenix felt the weight of history shift. Redstone was changed. The truth, once buried, was now roaring wild and free. And for the first time, Phoenix knew justice was possible, but only when everyone had the courage to chase it down together. For the first time in years, Redstone didn't wake to rumors or fear, but to the sound of neighbors gathering in the open, voices blending with the morning wind. Phoenix Carter stood in front of the sheriff's office, little more than a skeleton now, blackened timbers still smoldering, watching as people swept the sidewalk and carted off debris. Every movement, a small act of defiance against the darkness that had threatened to swallow their town. The arrests at the quarry had been the talk of every table at Lina Kim's diner. The evidence Phoenix and Sierra had gathered was ironclad. Owen Drake, the so-called Golden Boy, was in custody, and his network of accomplices was unraveling fast. Some were townsfolk, others outsiders, but none could hide from the tidal wave of confessions and accusations that followed. What stunned Redstone more was the part played by the Mustangs. Stories of Ashwalker leading the charge, scattering gunmen and blocking Owen's escape, blurred the line between legend and truth, until nobody cared which was which. By mid-morning, the community center was packed. Lina Kim called an emergency town meeting, and Phoenix found herself at the front of the hall with Sierra, Jordan, Maya, and a handful of reformers who had risked everything to bring the truth into daylight. There were farmers and teachers, tribal elders and teenagers, all gathered in tense, hopeful silence. Lina stepped to the podium. "We all know why we're here. Last night, Redstone faced its worst fears, and we stood together. This is our chance to choose what happens next." A murmur ran through the crowd. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Phoenix took a breath and walked forward, feeling the weight of 100 eyes. "We can't undo the past," she said, voice clear and calm. "But we can write new rules for how we live together. Not just laws, but trust. Not just order, but respect. Respect for each other, for the land, and for the wild things that call it home." She glanced at Ashwalker, standing in the shade outside, his coat shining like polished obsidian. "When I was at my lowest, it wasn't just people who saved me. The Mustangs showed me what it means to survive, to look out for your herd. They trusted me enough to help. Now it's our turn to help them and each other." Jordan stepped forward, holding up a poster. "We've been mapping the valleys and tracking the Mustangs' paths. We want to create a Mustang Watch. Volunteers who'll keep an eye on the herds, the water, and the land. It's not just about protecting horses. It's about protecting Redstone's future." A buzz of excitement and nervous hope spread through the room. Mrs. Yazzie, the Navajo elder, rose from her seat. "Our ancestors knew that wild places have spirits. If we dishonor them, we lose part of ourselves. The Mustangs chose to trust us. Let's prove we can be worthy of it." The proposal moved quickly. Young and old volunteered for Mustang Watch, some with binoculars and cameras, others with stories and songs. Lina Kim suggested town-funded water troughs along the main horse trails and stricter penalties for anyone caught harassing the herds. Sierra recommended regular town meetings, transparency for all law enforcement actions, and trauma support for those still healing from violence. Phoenix sat quietly as committees formed, voices overlapping, planning conservation projects, new school lessons on local history, and outreach to the tribal communities who had always known the land best. For the first time since she'd taken the badge, she saw a spark of something that felt real, belonging. Later that afternoon, the town gathered for a ceremony in the park. Ashwalker, his shoulder now bandaged, stood at the edge of the crowd, regal and unbowed. Children brought him apples and whispered thanks. Veterans saluted. Phoenix stood by his side, hands folded, her eyes damp with gratitude. Lena presented a plaque for Ashwalker and the Wild Mustangs, who reminded us that freedom isn't given, it's fought for and earned every day. The crowd applauded, laughter and tears mixing in the high desert air. As the sun dipped behind the cliffs, Phoenix looked around. The faces she'd once seen only through a lens of suspicion now open and unguarded. She caught Sierra's gaze and, for a heartbeat, everything felt possible. "You're staying, aren't you?" Sierra asked softly as the ceremony wound down. Phoenix nodded. "They offered me a promotion. City job, more pay. But I think I belong here with all of you. Redstone's not perfect. It may never be. But for the first time, I want to stay and see what we can build. Together." Sierra squeezed her shoulder. "We need you, and we need each other." As twilight gathered, Mustang Watch volunteers set out for their first patrols, binoculars in hand, determination in their steps. Jordan and Maya sketched plans for water stations and solar-powered cameras, while Mrs. Yazzie sang an old blessing song over the valley. The Mustangs grazed nearby, unbothered by the attention. But Ashwalker lingered by Phoenix, watching the crowd as if weighing them for himself. She reached out, brushing her fingers through his mane. "We're going to make this work," she promised, "for all of us." The future was uncertain. There would be setbacks, arguments, maybe more nights of fear. But for the first time in years, hope was louder than the old, poisonous silence. Redstone wasn't just surviving. It was beginning to heal. And Ashwalker, living legend, stood at the center of it all. A symbol not of taming the wild, but of honoring it, and finding strength in standing together. Days bled into weeks, but the changes taking hold in Redstone didn't fade with the headlines. The chaos and violence that had threatened to tear the town apart now served as fuel for something new. A steady, determined rebuilding that went far beyond brick and mortar. Phoenix felt it first in small ways. There were more people at the town meetings. Faces that once would have hidden behind curtains or crossed the street now stood in the open, raising their hands and their voices. Volunteers from Mustang Watch reported sightings each morning, mapping the Mustang's movements, filling in the story of Ashwalker and his herd with every hoofprint discovered along the valley's trails. A group of veterans, men and women who once nodded stiffly at Phoenix in the grocery store, now stopped to talk. Some helped lead trauma recovery workshops, using the back room of the community center for everything from guided meditation to late-night coffee and honesty. The old walls, stained with decades of spilled secrets, now echoed with laughter and the low hum of stories shared. Phoenix herself struggled with the weight of it all. The wounds from her attack were mostly healed, but the bruises on her spirit lingered. Nights were hardest. She'd wake from dreams of burning timbers and gunfire, sweat chilling her skin, mind racing with doubts. She was no stranger to nightmares, but now she let herself lean on Sierra, who always answered the phone, no matter the hour. One evening, Phoenix found herself sitting on the tailgate of her truck at the edge of the Mustang's valley. Ashwalker grazed nearby, his wound nearly faded to a scar. The herd was restless, wind teasing their manes, foals darting through the brush with bursts of wild energy. Sierra joined her, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. She handed one to Phoenix, who accepted it gratefully. "It's different now," Sierra said, her voice gentle as the twilight. I think people are starting to believe. In each other. In this place. Maybe even in themselves. Phoenix stared out over the valley, tracing the line of the distant hills. It's not easy. I still hear the things they said about me. Sometimes I almost believe them. Then you remember the truth, Sierra said. You stayed. You fought. You let yourself heal. That's what matters. Phoenix nodded. I guess so. It's not just me, though. The whole town's been living in fear, of change, of each other, of the things nobody wanted to say out loud. Sierra sipped her coffee. And now? Phoenix smiled, small and real. Now we talk. We argue, we mess up. But we talk, we listen. Downtown, the rebuilt sheriff's office was taking shape. This time with windows that looked out onto Main Street. A symbolic break from the old fortress mentality. The trauma recovery group painted a mural on the side. Wild Mustangs running beneath the Redstone cliffs. Ashwalker front and center. Maya and Jordan ran workshops at the high school, teaching students to use trail cams and field journals, bridging the gap between generations. The Mustang Watch grew, drawing in ranchers and teachers, elders and kids. Mrs. Yazzie brought her grandchildren to meetings, telling old stories and blessing the land and dine. They were still skeptics, and the work was slow, but something fundamental had shifted. Trust was beginning to outweigh suspicion. Phoenix let herself join in more. She shared her story in small pieces. The night in the desert, the pain and terror, the wild hope that came with the Mustangs. Veterans nodded, understanding the language of scars. Some days the stories hurt to tell, but each time she spoke, the weight lessened a little, replaced by something lighter, community. At home, Phoenix tended to her own healing. She picked up the old guitar her mother had left her, coaxing familiar songs from memory. Some nights she played softly by the window, the notes drifting into the desert air, blending with the sound of Mustangs calling to each other. She started to write too, not police reports, but letters to herself, charting her progress. Some she shared with Sierra, who responded with jokes and gentle nudges. Others she kept private, a map of her own recovery. Trust, she realized, was a practice, not a destination. Each day she chose to trust Redstone a little more, and each day the town responded in kind. Walls that had been built from pain, her own and the town's, were slowly, stubbornly coming down. Ashwalker became a legend in his own right. People left apples and carrots at the edge of the valley. Children sketched him in school, and his presence at the Mustang Watch ceremonies always drew a hush of respect. He and Phoenix shared a bond that words could never quite explain, a connection born of shared wounds, mutual rescue, and a trust that was hard-won but unbreakable. One afternoon, Phoenix found a group of teenagers sitting quietly by the Mustang Trail, notebooks in hand. She asked what they were writing. Poems, said one, a shy girl named Kim. About the horses, about not being afraid anymore. Phoenix's heart swelled. That's what it's all about, she said. Not being afraid, or at least, not letting fear decide for you. The Mustangs continued to roam, free and proud, returning each dawn and dusk as if to check on the town that had finally chosen to honor them. Each time Phoenix saw Ashwalker leading his herd across the red-dusted flats, she felt a sense of hope and belonging she'd never known before. Redstone still faced challenges. Old wounds don't heal overnight, and new troubles would come. But something sacred had been restored, a town and a sheriff, each learning to trust again. Each learning, at last, that true community was possible. Dawn in Redstone Valley always felt like a new promise. The desert held its breath as pale light crept over the red cliffs, painting everything in gold and rose. On this particular morning, Phoenix Carter stood quietly by the fence at the edge of town, boots dusted with dew, hands resting on the old wood rail. She watched as Ashwalker, healed and proud, led his herd from the wild hills toward the open flats, a dark river of muscle and spirit moving through the stillness. The townspeople were gathering behind her, drawn by something they couldn't name. Children pressed close to the fence, faces shining with awe. Veterans and ranchers, teachers and teenagers, all stood together, blinking in the soft light. Even Mayor Lena Kim was there, shoulders relaxed for the first time in months, chatting quietly with Mrs. Yazzie. Phoenix's heart was full, but calm, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. She looked back at the faces behind her, then at the herd before her, and felt the bond that now tied them all together. She reached out, letting her fingers brush Ashwalker's mane as he passed. The stallion paused, turning his head so their eyes met. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Two survivors, two leaders, two wild spirits who had found a place to belong. She smiled and stepped forward, raising her voice so everyone could hear. "Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty," she said. Her words carried on the breeze. "It's about building trust. Every day, in every decision. It's about respecting each other, respecting the land, and letting the wild in others, and in ourselves, have a place." Ashwalker let out a deep, rolling nicker, as if in agreement. The children giggled, and the tension that had hovered over Redstone for so long seemed to lift. Phoenix continued, "We've all made mistakes, we've all been afraid. But look at us now, standing together, stronger for what we've survived. Real change doesn't come from power or force. It comes from courage, from listening to those we once doubted, and from choosing hope, even when it's hard." She turned, inviting others to come closer. "If you want to honor these Mustangs, if you want to honor what we've built, don't just watch. Take care of each other. Stand up when you see something wrong. Trust the land, trust the wild things, trust yourselves. That's how we make sure the darkness never comes back." A hush fell over the crowd as Ashwalker led his herd toward the far side of the valley, their hooves pounding a rhythm older than any law. The Mustang Watch volunteers fanned out, moving with quiet confidence, binoculars ready, keeping one eye on the horses, the other on each other. It was a new kind of family, one built not by blood, but by choice. As the sun climbed higher, the ceremony faded into a celebration. Kids raced through the grass, playing games inspired by the Mustangs. Sierra and Lena organized a barbecue, and neighbors who'd once barely spoken now laughed together, sharing food and stories. Even the old-timers who had doubted Phoenix found themselves swept up in the sense of possibility. Later, as dusk settled over Redstone, Phoenix walked the empty streets with Sierra at her side. The mural on the rebuilt sheriff's office glowed in the lamplight, wild horses running free beneath a desert sky, their shapes fierce and beautiful. Sierra nudged her. "You know, this is the first time in a long time that Redstone feels right, like we belong here." Phoenix nodded, emotions swirling in her chest. "It's not just us. It's everyone. For so long, people were waiting for a hero to save them, or a villain to blame. But in the end, it was a herd, a wild, stubborn, unpredictable herd that brought us together. Maybe that's what family really is." Sierra grinned. "A little wild, a little stubborn?" Phoenix laughed, the sound rolling through the empty street. "Exactly." At the edge of town, she stopped to watch the Mustangs one more time. Ashwalker lifted his head, meeting her gaze across the distance. For a moment, Phoenix let herself remember everything: the fear, the loneliness, the pain. But now those memories were softened by all that had come after: healing, trust, forgiveness, and the simple, powerful act of standing together. She breathed in the scent of sage and earth. "You'll always have a place here," she whispered, "to Ashwalker, to Sierra, to Redstone itself." "So will I." The herd moved out across the valley, choosing their own path, but always returning. Phoenix understood then. Belonging was never about being tamed or controlled. It was about being seen, accepted, and trusted for who you are. Justice wasn't a hammer. It was a bridge, built one choice, one moment of courage at a time. As night settled in, the stars blinked awake, scattering silver across the desert. Phoenix turned back toward town, her heart light, her step sure. Redstone had chosen hope. She had chosen to stay. The wild had found a home. And if if Redstone's story could reach even one more heart, Phoenix hoped they'd carry this lesson with them. Every community has a chance to choose courage, to choose healing, to choose a new kind of family. If this story moved you, share it. Stand with your own herd. And remember, sometimes the wildest part of us is what saves us in the end.